Looks like everything is placed. I would like to welcome everybody present here. Thank you very much for this, many of you having accepted our invitation. I'd like to welcome those who follow us through the internet, on our website, through the link. You can follow the whole conference, presentations, and today's activity can be followed. I would like to sincerely welcome the presenters, as well as Katalin Sili, Chairperson, Commissioner of the Prime Minister's Office, Ms. Solari Bogdanovich-Alexandra, Deputy Mayor, Werner Paul, State Secretary. I'd like to welcome presenters at the second block as well, Václav Károly, Member of the Parliament, Beke and Szőcs Zsombor, relatives of the political prisoners convicted innocently. I would like to welcome Mr. Kormát Ferenc, Commissioner, Minister level, Morvai Kristina. She's hiding in the back rows. And also I'd like to welcome all of you, the whole audience. I couldn't possibly list everybody by name, not to mention that I wouldn't know half of the audience in person. In the 21st century, it's been an unprecedented conceptual law case lawsuit in Romania. It's not over yet. Two secular men, totally innocently, has been imprisoned for 5 years each. This conference will be about this. Fact without evidence, based on quasi-accusations. Dear friends, this is not an individual case in Romania, in Transylvania, but this is the most upsetting one. There are a series of people convicted, Hungarians, are charged with accusations, and also those who speak about the right of Transylvania for autonomy. It is no accident that mayors are challenged based on different reasons, who raise their voices for the necessity of using mother tongue Hungarians, or on the subject of cultural independence. They are sued, they are accused, and try to demolish them. As for Mr. Beke, István and Mr. Zoltán, what happened to them, it is truly unprecedented. Unprecedented, and I'd like to ask our dear Romanian friends, I do not want to raise any false accusations, I do not want to insult anybody, but more clever scientists than myself have stated that in Romania there's never been independent justice. This is a historic heritage. Our Romanian friends will have to accept that. Not only is it the interest of the Hungarian nationality living there, but also the interest of the Romanian people. And the conference today has been organized to raise the international attention, to raise awareness to this unprecedented case. Unprecedented in terms of what it looks like, but there are similar cases, very many similar cases in Transylvania. Why? Because coming closer to the 100 years anniversary, they tried, and pretty much successfully, intimidate Hungarians living there so that nobody would dare to open his or her mouth on the subject of autonomy or collective rights. We'd like to ask for international assistance there, so that in Romania, in fact, justice should become independent, and it should not be the Secret Service telling the court or the prosecutor what to do. I do not want to any more of your time, because I was meant to give you introductory thoughts. We'll have much better, much more well-versed presenters today. There will be a slight change in the program because the State Secretary, Moldavia, was given an assignment today which couldn't be postponed, couldn't make it, couldn't come. Therefore, we were happy to ask Chair Lady Siri Kotalin to deliver a presentation, not instead of him, but at her own right. So I'd like to thank you very much for your attention. After the introduction, I'd like to head over to Deputy Mayor Solibrokvitske Alexandra for her to address the audience and open the conference. Distinguished President Director, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, I'm very happy to welcome you here in the building of the Metropolitan Cities building on behalf of Budapest Metropolitan City Justice for Mr. Beke, István and Zoltán. This is the title of the conference. According to the stipulations of the basic law of Hungary, Hungary is promoting the unification and cohesion of the Hungarian nation, and we bear responsibility for Hungarians living across the border as well, promoting their development, the development of the community, supporting the inspirations to maintain their Hungarian traditions and community rights. It is our task and obligation, therefore, on the token of national cohesion, that up to the best of our knowledge, we our fellow compatriots living across the border, and based on the sad historic experiences of the 20th century, we do our utmost so that none of the Hungarians would suffer disadvantages just because they are of Hungarian origin, and Hungarian communities would also receive the maximum support of the mother nation. Budapest is not only the capital of Hungary, but also the Hungarian nation, primarily, obviously, hometown for Budapest dwellers, but also all the Hungarian compatriots here in the Carpathian Basin as well. The metropolitan municipality is trying to its utmost to support international cooperation and establishing live cooperations. For example, the twin city agreements that we have been signing with Berekszás and Székelyudvarhely since 2010. But we are also proud to say that Eötvös Loránd Science University has organized for the 23rd time this year, here in Budapest, the Hungarian university students from all over the Carpathian Basin and the Carpathian Basin Hungarian Summer University. Participants are offered the possibility of mastering the skills in the mother country using their mother tongue, so that they continue their further education using their own language. The sad reason for this conference is the legal case of two secular young people who, on a second instance, were convicted for 5 years each by the Supreme Court of Romania, so that Bucharest, first instance, acquitted the defendants for not having committed the crimes that they were said to have committed. Justice makes it free. John says that they have a choice, but it's all too sad when law and moral splits up. And in fact, instead of justice in the field of protecting minority in many cases, we are confronted with justice services. This is especially true when we hear about Hungarians who suffered the absurd conditions of the given country trying to make their justice coming through. I'd like to thank you very much for the Legal Protection Institution of Minorities for embracing the case of these two young men, and not only represent them in court, but also inform the public, both here and internationally, about the current status of the case. I trust very much that the conference will contribute to Hungarians living abroad receiving effective legal protection, and last but not least, the two young people should be released as soon as possible. The municipality of Budapest is there for you. You can count on us, and you may be aware that when on October 23rd we spent a celebration Székely Udvarhelye, 5 days that was organized with our Székely Udvarhelye colleagues jointly. Then the mayor visited the Csíkszereda prison, visiting Beke, István and Szőcs Zoltán, and he also expressed his support. The two young men, two gentlemen. Moreover, during the celebration, the Romanian approach, the unworthy Romanian approach, that is sanctioning the Székely municipality for the Hungarian flags. He also made a promise whenever there is such a sanction levied upon, and it is being levied upon, then the Budapest municipality will cover those charges. Those sanctions will be paid by the Budapest municipality. So, on the token of this support, we are happy to offer the venue to you. Myself, I represent the mayor and the Budapest municipality. I'd like to wish for you a very successful conference in all senses, and plenty of strength and sturdiness to everybody contributing to this cause. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Deputy Mayor. She apologized before for having to go to another event. She may be somewhat late there as well, but we were happy to listen to her, and it became clear from her presentation that it is no accident that we are here. Mr. Tarlós István, Mayor, heading this movement. The municipality of Metropolitan Municipality is also taking care of Hungarians living across the border. This is our second conference here in this room. In autumn of last year, we've had the conference about Subcarpathian Kárpát-alja. Conference was organized there as well, because there we have the Beregszász, is the twin city of Budapest. And I'd like to hand over to Chair Lady Szili Katalin for her to deliver her presentation. Permit me to sincerely welcome you all, and primarily welcome the family members, the relatives, Mr. Director, Mr. State Secretary, President of the Committee, MPs, Government Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you all at this conference, and I would like to thank the Director for organizing this conference. My task here is not primarily this, but I'd like to hand over the message of Podar Party State Secretary. Who could make it, I will try to substitute him. You might say that this is about the fate of two young men, seemingly, because this is not only about the fate of the two young people and the criminal case against them. It is much more about a community that we call the Hungarian nation, be it either in the Carpathian Basin or outside. Therefore, this conference, Mr. Director, I'd like to start or title this conference with an exclamation mark, because we all know the history in which the two young men who are patriots, the court, the first instance, acquitted them. After that, second instance, series judgment was cast upon them. First, they were accused of misusing, abusing pyrotechnical devices, and then after that, attempt against the community, and by now, simply, the criminal court intends to judge them based on a terrorist act. This is quite unique and peculiar, because based on this judgment, everybody might sense, and the European Parliament MP lady might confirm, that we have seen submissions in Romania which were about the community to be viewed as national security risk factor. So obviously this criminal case might be about trying to produce proof for the community, which is called the Hungarian community, or the secular CK community, per se, means or is identical with the risk factor against the national security. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the neoliberal political elite, I'm sorry about this word elite, but the political class who are sitting there in Europe somewhere, it would be better for them to compile a report about that. Ms. Sargentini would not deal with democracy within the European countries or among European countries, but much rather why communities need to be afraid, why they're threatened, and why there are procedures against them using the coat of arms or using the flag of a nation or any community. And this is happening, or why there are criminal cases ongoing that the director also mentioned, conceptual legal procedure, justification and verification of the original intent. Then question might arise why the European Union is not dealing with that. Because when a country has become a member of the community of the European Union, the country also had to pass an exam about how they deal with what behavior they demonstrate versus their own national minorities. Ladies and gentlemen, this is rather peculiar that this exam needs to be passed again. But after that, the European Union pushes this issue away from them. They are not willing to deal with it, and they're saying that the issue of the European national minorities is within the scope of the national entities. You might ask us whether it's right this way. No, it's not right this way. And when we're preparing for the European Union parliamentary elections, in fact, we need to prepare, and hopefully the next European Parliament, the majority of them, will still support the Europe of nations and still support the new European paradigm, whereby, in fact, support is provided not only to nations with majority societies, but also the minorities who number about 50 or 60 million altogether, living as indigenous minorities, living in those countries in Europe altogether. I also need to elaborate on something else which characterizes the world of the 21st century. The Europe, within the Europe of the 21st century, in fact, as of today, 100 years after 1918, in Budapest, now, in the building of the municipality of the metropolitan city, we need to deal with two young people who are accused in a conceptual law case, and what else should it be if you follow the logic from pyrotechnical devices to terror attacks, and we are talking about their conviction. It's not only about that, let me emphasize again, but threatening, jeopardizing the whole community. 28 years ago, after the change of the regime, and the government commissioner may confirm that, we are making no progress in restitutional cases after 28 years following the change of the regime. When the issues of agriculture, piece of real estate are still on the table, when judgment with the Botyan was like what it was, and we still have to fight for educational institutions to be maintained. Let's just think about Moja or in the not too far history, we were talking about the Catholic Lyceum, and if you look around, I believe all of you could add another specific issue, which not only will promote the issue to be put on the table, which, by the way, is handled properly anywhere else in Europe, autonomy, but the original status quo is decreasing or diminishing for the Hungarian community. And this is quite radiant if you look at the individual cases, which I indicated myself. And again, let me emphasize this again. Not only is it about threatening a community, but also putting or stigmatizing a community, stigmatizing or introducing community in the light shaded by the majority. nation, majority society, stating that that minority is a risk factor for the majority. In the constitution of Romania, how come? How is it possible? We are so far away from Hungarian community to be part of the Romanian constitution. We are too far away from that. In January 2017, the three Hungarian parties have signed a cooperation agreement whereby they made it evident that the secular historic borders earmark the geographical autonomy, not ethnical, but regional, geographical autonomy and borders. As I said, Hungarian parties have done that, but we are so far away from achieving the results that I define myself on the occasion of the joint session of the 100 years old Transylvanian Secular Council to ask the Romanian majority society and politics to sit down around the table and have negotiations so that until the terminus technicus, the definitions could be discussed, to speak from the, to think from the same notes, to understand each other, what it means for a community in the frame of the European subsidiarity, the autonomy, what does it mean, so that they can make decisions about their own fate. We are so far away from that. One, dear friends, today here and we need to talk about the case of Szőcs, Zoltán and Beke István. What has happened in the past 100 years? Would there be any hope for us? And it's no exaggeration for me to state, maybe, that the case of Beke István, Szőcs, Zoltán, and when we have just lit the second candle in Advent, past Sunday, our hopes are imprisoned. The hopes of a community were imprisoned with them, along with these two gentlemen. And let me tell you, our objective is not to make heroes out of two young people, much rather. Our objective here is to find and serve justice, for making sure that somebody makes justice for them, not using the card of national minority again, much rather. Justice in a true sense of the word. And possibly when that happens, when true justice is provided, and when we understand that in Europe of the 21st century, in fact, for communities, the indigenous communities, the right for them to be able to stay in their homeland, to live well in their homeland, then let's raise the other question as well that we meet every day, and this issue is called migration. The European Parliament today considers the fate of those more important, the migrants, than those who would like to live in their home country, be it either up north from Hungary or secular land, Székelyföld, or we might mention other minority communities. Mr. Botner Tamás, my former community MP, could confirm that because Mr. Skamler, they've submitted the initiative to the European Council, in which they wanted to make sure that this issue would be tabled, would be put on the table and on the agenda, and the European Council, the European Union, was meant to be convinced to deal with that and to clearly state that this could not be washed together with the fate of the Hungarian communities who belong to another country now, with those who are knocking on the doors of Europe and who would like to create their own future here, even at the cost, I might say, that they work against our culture, jeopardize our culture. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I also need to elaborate on something else. I cannot possibly ignore that in the European Union, our politicians working in the European Union in the past year have done a lot, and that's why I mentioned Mr. Golden Tamás and our friends as inspirations, because they're fellow former European Union MPs. In the past year, there were initiatives whereby the European Union MPs tried to open the eyes of Europe, raising their attention about the importance of the fate of the possibilities of the indigenous communities, the national minorities living there. As a continuation of that, in December last year, Magyar Anna, in the European Union, the MP, initiated an issue about the linguistic rights, and that was approved, that was accepted. European linguistic issues are the basics. If you lose your language, if you lose our language, then we're lost, and we lose everything. As Hoffman Rosa, MP, in January, also had the European Council to accept a document, a report, which not only surveyed the situation about the linguistic rights, but also prompted everybody to have the minority, the linguistic charters ratified in those countries where it was not done yet. And Mr. Csakipál, in the Parliament of the European Union, also made another initiative. Resolution was approved based on his initiative, which again promotes the establishment of the legal framework, the background, also distinguishing or differentiating minorities living in other countries, so-called indigenous minorities, and resolution was also passed about the minimum standards in the European Union. Dear friends, we cannot possibly ignore the fact that on the table of the next European Parliament, we all together should submit a joint proposal which would not only define the desire as what should be done, but in fact we Hungarians, and this is very much related to proposals for 2020, we Hungarians need to submit a document whereby in fact we define that adhering to the European Union resolutions should be adhered to, should be compulsory by the European Union members with regards to the rights of the national minorities. The minority package, which was documented with 1 million signatures by RMDS and CAM, which will be submitted to the next European Parliament. I go further. I believe it would also be necessary that at the next European Union Committee, it should be a dedicated task defined. The case of the European indigenous communities should belong to an EU commissioner, and we have to keep these issues on the agenda, although you might say it's quite far away from the specific issue of Szőcs, Zoltán and Beke. As I said, seemingly it is the case of two young people. No, it is not that. It is the case, it is an issue for the Hungarian nation, the Hungarian minority, and again, we do not want to make heroes out of these two young people. What we truly and simply want is that they are judged upon based on the true facts without any looking aside or pushing around, beating around the bush. Ladies and gentlemen, two more sentences. The issue of media. In 21st century, not only in Europe but also in the world of the 21st century, media has become the fourth branch of power. There is huge responsibility borne by media in terms of to what extent they assist or what extent they do not assist, do not help, because by itself, and this is also about the majority Romanian society, the media can radicalize the majority Romanian society. So I would promote that media runs support in this sense, so that in fact the community rights, whereby Hungary, the mother country, would like to help the minority community. The media should be a partner for us in this case, because it is only together that we can achieve goals here, that we can achieve results here. We should demonstrate coordinated efforts. If we do that, if we unify, then in fact, I believe we can achieve results. So, the task. The homework is to stand up for each other, to back up each other for the cause of European paradigm change, which would be about the Europe of nations, whereby in fact minority rights are taken seriously in a true sense, and the indigenous minorities' cases should be catered for by Europe itself and would regard that as its own task. Mr. Director, Mr. State Secretary, it's Advent we're celebrating, and let me repeat that. Last Sunday we have lit a second candle of hope. We cannot possibly lose that hope. We can't lose that, and we have to protest, stand up against somebody imprisoning our community hopes. I would like to wish for all of you a very blessed, beautiful celebration. I would like to wish for the two young people to be served justice, and so that fear should not govern the communities across the border, and they should feel that we are backing them, we are behind them, we are supporting them. Thank you very much for the attention. Wish you a blessed Christmas period to you and your loved ones, your family members. As for the family members of the two young people, I wish strength to you, and be aware that we are with you, and we stand up for the two young people, young men, together with you. Wish you all the best. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you very much, Ms. Chairlady, and I believe these noble thoughts lay down the foundation for our future work. We are thinking in terms of nation. We fight for the nation. I'd like to welcome, on behalf of the Moldova Republic, leading diplomat. Thank you very much for having accepted our invitation. Technical comment. I'd like to ask all of you, if I look at the mobile phone, don't get it wrong. I'm not browsing the internet, I'm communicating with my colleagues on some logistics issues. So thank you for understanding. Mr. Venepal, let me hand over to you, State Secretary, Justice Ministry, for him to deliver his presentation. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, distinguished audience, first of all, I'd like to thank you very much for the honoring invitation to this event. I can admit, when I heard about the title, to what extent political power can influence the state of law, then I thought of Mr. Deák Ferencz's quotes on the subject of the press law. He said, if it was up to me, there would be only one paragraph in the press law. You shouldn't lie. You must not lie. Politics is not meant to influence justice. Politics should not do that, must not do that. But obviously, I would like to elaborate on this in more length. Obviously, we need to define the general term of law enforcement. Law enforcement and the court branches should be separated. It's one of the three classic branches. Court and law enforcement are two different terms expressing the unity of organizational function. This is the public power institution which finally and eventually concludes the legal disputes. Law enforcement agency can only be, or activity can only be exercised by the courts. As for the organs, in general terms, the prosecution office, law enforcement agencies, and the courts make up for the organization, the fabric of justice. The judging activities of the courts is a standalone branch within the state structure. Judges cannot be instructed. They normally receive their assignment from the head of state. These are the guarantees for keeping rights. The organization is headed by the chief prosecutor, carrying out his activities based on the supervision of the state. In Hungary, it is not supervised, it's not subordinate to the government. On behalf of the state, they represent prosecution. Historic flashback. There are hundreds of years of traditions for separating the branches within the modern state. These have become the predominant criteria in the 17th century. None of the democratic states can exist without separating these branches. The triple breakdown of the branches provide for the backbone of the modern state. Clarification of that is one of the most important issues today, here and now, because this is how the internal structure of the state is built, which is the basis for the legitimacy of state power. Reviewing these issues, we get down to the basic principles of providing justice. Clarification of that is absolutely a must for the modern and autonomous modern state and modern dweller citizens. None of the court judgments could be well based without that, and the legal nature of the procedure must be raised as well. These basic principles are defined by different laws. The major issue here is potential impact or influence of politics on justice, and this is about the court independence. When reviewing that, there are plenty of views and plenty of studies on this subject, because from among the basic principles of justice on the subject of decision competency, this is the most relevant one. The objective set of criteria of the basic principle entails the subjective human processes and factors when it comes to judgment. Therefore, there cannot be two identical views on the same subject. The question might arise: to what extent independence is provided for in making justice, or to what extent is it influenced by subjective elements, or where is the borderline whereby court judges can still have freedom, some liberty in making decisions in that or this way or that way. Therefore, this is like control function exercised over the implementation phase, the enforcement activities. Therefore, the basic premise is to provide for the set of or the norms of justice, legitimating its operation, setting its framework, its set of rules. There is an interesting duality in terms of two branches of power working independently, but standalone without each other. They could possibly exist. One assumes the existence of the other. Question might arise whether the two branches of power could be independent when the norms set by this would be automatically applied by the other. This is the everlasting dilemma of state structure. Obviously, the political setup is influenced by the legal framework of any state. There are minor or major flaws in the setup of each one of the countries, but we like to say that one state is good, the other state is bad. The objective here is to provide for freedom by separating state functions. Labor categories are separated as well, and therefore institutions can be controlled and monitored upon. In the 17th century, this was characterizing the fight against the absolute monarchy. To what extent the separation of state power branches can be separated? There are three different answers. On the one hand, between these branches, we can differentiate between these branches based on their function. So the task of jurisdiction is possible. Bring about laws or pass laws. Second branch is assigned to specifically apply the laws in specific cases. And the task for courts is to provide for legitimacy. To prevent dictatorships in the past few decades, there were some pressing issues. John Locke Montesquieu and Montesquieu actually defined the need for separation of different branches of state. István also wrote about that. The Holy Crown study was the first one, Verbőci, wrote a book about that. The organic state idea was merged with the separation of branches between different powers. The first question was raised at that time. We were confronted with the practices applied in Western European countries. In Hungary, we also had to take into consideration the independence aspirations in a country where power is concentrated, obviously. Different issues have come up. Hungary has always been characterized by fight for independence. The April laws in 1848 introduced the new term of responsibility and also introduced the unified system of agencies subordinated to ministries. This was the set of guarantees for divided different branches of power, and this has resulted in a Hungarian constitution. Between the two walls, parliamentary democracy evolved. From time to time, there were historically devastating periods, occupation of Hungary, and so Mr. István Beke said in 1947 that power needs to be justified and verified from the moral point of view. A state or a power cannot be uncontrollable, should not be and must not be uncontrollable. Therefore, the proper balance should be struck. Beke, state values, his new concepts were very interesting. The courts were not meant to be concentrating power, the state power, much rather it should be independent. Therefore, as opposed to dictatorship, proper means should be introduced to offset that, to prevent that from happening. This is why justice and enforcement was put within a framework, setting the rules, setting the laws, providing for organizational autonomy and requirements of security. After the 1848 revolution, the Vienna-based Supreme Judgment Board made the final decisions separating public administration from state administration. In the age of dualism, one might outline the importance of the public administration court, which the communist power eradicated in 1949. The constitution of the Republic of Hungary was the next milestone. In the 2010 period, constitutional reform has started, and the basic laws opposed to the old constitution define the Curia as the top level of the court organization, and the National Justice Council has gone away in 2012. Instead of that, the National Court Office was introduced as a new institution. Criticism was often raised against that because the leaders of the court organization control themselves, obviously supervising themselves and other institutions as well. The independence could not possibly be provided for. Obviously, unbiased decisions couldn't be guaranteed if one fills two jobs at the same time. So this might induce subjective judgment, subjectivity. In such a system, a global and overall structure change was needed in the core structure. Therefore, the National Court Office institution was introduced, better accountability, and unbiased decisions were meant to be the outcome. Curia was also mentioned, making sure that different persons are different positions. the overall new model was introduced, this was meant to share power, different power branches. Problems related to the former reforms could not possibly have been resolved. Radical reforms were needed, and these were true milestones in the history of justice. In the 2014-18 parliamentary cycle, the public administration restructuring has taken place. Therefore, the court jurisdiction was separated from other branches of exercising power. The objective was to avoid an infringement of the state of law. Overall principles, one might make mention of the basic principles of justice as well, which are related to the guarantees of the framework introduced in order to separate branches. These are universal values which were established during our history, which provided for the safeguards of the human rights protection, so that the individuals are protected against courts and against authorities, and also the independence of the courts should be guaranteed. These are the most important statements. The monopoly of justice is handed over to the Curia, the courts. The county level, and in the future the standalone public administration level courts will provide for that function. That means that in Hungary, laws and legal rules become compulsory for each one of the courts. This provides for equality. From the legal sense, everybody is equal in front of the court. So this is the basic principle characterizing the legal system. Our whole legal system, there is a legal need for similar judgments cast upon similar cases in a consequent manner. Inconsistency is of key importance. The use of mother tongue is a key right that all the citizens are entitled to. Therefore, everybody would be equal of the law, and there would be no discrimination. Most Albert also talked about the concept of everybody to be viewed innocent. Man is innocent as long as he or she is not proven guilty. I want to make sure that our children grow up in a belief, in this belief, and not having preconceptions just because they do not know somebody. The basic law also expresses that the assumption of somebody being innocent cannot be restricted. This is an inevitable part of the set of criteria of democratic states of law. This is a collective term that entails that prosecutor must provide the proof of. The question might arise whether there is any fact that's proven in 100% which we may not have doubts about, or which may not be questioned. During the whole process up until the hearing at the court, there are human factors, dozens of human factors, and in this case the judge must put the facts and proofs, strike proper balance and consider that, and this is why it's very dangerous when there is any political influence. International contracts also stipulate, like Bill of Rights or the European agreements on human rights, also stipulate the need for considering the assumption of everybody being innocent as a key fact. So, final decision of the judge should not be influenced by any pre-indicative statements, especially in law cases. Parties involved are entitled to appropriate professional defense. professional support. Everybody's entitled for being protected, be it either public administration, judgmental authority. Without legal remedy, without legal representation, nobody can be convicted, nobody can be held responsible for. The principle of fair processes was stipulated in Rome Treaty as well. Everybody is entitled for his or her case to be assessed, to be judged by an independent and unbiased court in a fair manner and public manner, and to pass resolutions about their obligations and in terms whether the accusations are well founded from the professional point of view or not. This is stipulated in different rules, and they are entitled for unbiased procedures. In one of the resolutions, the Constitutional Court says that the constitutional decree applies to each one of the cases, especially criminal law and procedural law. Such guarantees must be provided and fulfilled. Also, according to the articles of European procedural law, this is a quality that should be the framework for each one of the law cases, therefore maintaining all the laws, fractional laws or particular cases. We might state whether the unbiased approach was exercised or not. The governing rule here is unbiased and just approach. On the subject of each one of the cases, the judge is expected to be unbiased, and no preconception should influence his or her decision. The laws also try to define the unbiased approach and regulate all the processes accordingly. One might mention the social and economic rights as well. The Hungarian laws stipulate a very strict set of rules, a framework, just like the European Union. Court judges cannot be any party members, and the principle of being just would be expressed in passing righteous and legally well-founded decisions. Applying rules and laws in an unfair manner, misusing power or negative discrimination against anybody, and not properly informing the subject or infringing with the basic principle of politeness. These are to be avoided. These must not happen. The term of independence for judges, the court as such should be independent, and also the judging person, the judge himself, should be independent as well. Independent from both internal and external influence. Being independent from external factors, the court must be independent of any external organization, be it the government, political parties, any other lawyer institutions, law institutions, the civil society, commerce, or any other party that might infringe with the autonomy of the court or the autonomy. And I believe this is the complete answer to the question that we are dealing with here. Question might arise: to what extent is the judge responsible? With precise consideration of all the facts, the judge can only exercise internal control. The task of the court of second instance is not to make the first instance responsible, much rather to extend the justice function. The other basic criterion is being independent from the political sense. If the judge is involved in political activities, then the question might arise whether or not the judge is neutral. According to the ethical codex of the judge himself can protect his independence, not only being independent from political parties, but also being independent from any other external or internal influence. If the court organization's independence is being reviewed, the initial point would be that the court organization should be separated from any other branches of the state, any other power branches. The primary responsibility of the National Assembly is to maintain independence for the courts. The National Assembly defines the procedural and material preconditions as to how the courts operate, how they work. Upon the completion of the assignment is also defined by the National Assembly. Exemption of judges decided by the National Assembly as well. The government, as head of the executing power, provides for the court's material and procedural conditions. Any means of delivering court resolutions and the framework as well as the set of laws are provided them. I've mentioned external influences already. The European Court of Justice defined in case of the Strombeck-Austrian issue that national separation, separate approach in case of national issues is needed. The judges need to be independent from their colleagues as well, including the horizontal professional connections. So in a certain sense, total independence may not be achieved, only a special relation vis-a-vis the other colleagues working in other countries. The judges can be suspended by the President of the Republic at any point of time. However, judges cannot be sanctioned or punished. Secondly, judges' decisions can only be supervised in the second instance process based on certain opinions, guarantees by himself, cannot possibly provide for justice, and the court practices to be able to fulfill its social function. The issue of political influence and the court's independence is independent from each other, and the question is where the Hungarians are at, or how they rank within the European nations. We live among other European nations, therefore our legal norms should be analog with those of Western countries, not identical though. We also need to take into consideration our individual institutions, and the major objective has to support the growth and development of our nation. In our days, digitization and globalization are the major challenges, primarily thinking about the European Union law. The basic contradiction within the EU legal structure is that it tries to coordinate national laws, nation laws, and that's a difficult issue. In some cases it's very difficult, so in some other cases it is impossible to coordinate everything. Globalization and legal harmonization are two different terms. Therefore, law of the courts being independent is a basic requirement. The European community also dealt with the issue of national courts and Court of Justice as being independent. The good quality, high quality decisions and resolution court rulings were assessed as well. Accountability and forecastability are the consistent approach in terms of court rulings. And again, everybody, including politicians, should refrain from influencing court rulings. That's an overall expectation. The argument is often raised there that courts and the judges cannot possibly ignore the public judgment on certain cases, not fully and not completely. From time to time, on a regular basis, the judges are expected to accept being held accountable and reporting on their approach, on their moral and professional standards and decisions. In terms of judges being independent, the major rule is that they should be free and independent of any influence. However, morally speaking, they live in the same society, so in the course of the activity of the judge, they cannot exclude the external world, and obviously the society that they live in is influencing their decisions. The question is to what extent, and these factors are also important because they might have a positive or even negative contribution to any court ruling. If we investigate to what extent the judges are accountable, then we might easily be confronted with the issue that being held accountable may bring about the issue of losing independence. But again, the third branch of power, justice and enforcement, should be totally independent. That was one of the premises, the basic rules. So the solution of these issues is trusted to the member states by the European Union, because there are substantial, significant differences in the legal setup of each of the countries. All in all, one might state that the basic principle of court independence entails different sub-issues, sub-categories. There are proposals, pros and cons for each one of the arguments. Politics should always respect the overall rules of state of law, and in fact they must not influence the operation of justice and operation of courts. This might only be controlled and regulated with the clear set of rules, set of goals, and the framework set in democratic societies. Basically, the legal application and independence in this domain is the guarantee for state of law. Without that, there is no state of law. Different countries apply different practices. The legitimacy of each one of them are accepted. We are not perfect. Nobody is perfect. But just like Wash Orwell wrote, without law and order, there is no proper society. I trust very much that the Bucharest-based institution, they will manage this issue properly, avoiding the need for going to Strasbourg. Let me conclude my presentation with this thought. And again, thank you very much for the invitation. Mr. State Secretary, thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. We almost became legal science now. This lays down the foundation for future talks. Now we know what independent justice or European legal structure should become like, which is, unfortunately, is reality in Hungary. After the break, we hear about the practical situation in Romania. Now we'll have a 20 minutes break until 10:40 coffee break. For those of you who would like to wait, or not now, not now. Well done. With some further delay, we'll continue our work. In a break, we've had Trote Tibor riding from Transylvania, heading the Transylvania-Hungarian party. And then I will hand over to Beke, wife of Beke István, on her experiences with the Romanian justice. Csilla, over to you. I would like to welcome you all. Those of you trying to help us in putting an end to this nightmare, so the justice that we have been fighting for 3 years should be realized. As an outsider, I might tend to believe that this is a tragic comedy, just a film script, with some hint of reality. But living through this life, spiritually, morally, this is like torture. People and families are dangled in the ground. All the bad things that happen to the guys, to the boys, and to us. Well, thinking back, what we felt when the community has gotten together for us, stood up for us. Many people supported us, and we'll never be able to thank that enough. The trust that we're given has been and will be a source of hope for us. A bomb was exploded, but it was not done by Beke István in 2015. This bomb was about manipulating the public, manipulating the inhabitants, and intimidating people. They created the terrorist case of this century, making or ridiculing actually the justice of the country. The boys, sometime in 2015, they met for a friendly chat. This has lasted about 3.5 hours. Originally there were 7, and then they remained 5. The Szőcs brothers left after that for France to work, and they wanted to discuss the issues, tasks for the future. There was the defendant victim there who decided to record the whole conversation. He arrived with a recording device. Either he was wired or he used his telephone. When they thought that they listened to them, tapped them through their own telephones, it was not right. It was the protected victim. He was closest to the microphone. This recorded material, he, the undercover victim or somebody else, edited, recorded on CD. Editing has been proven that only 5% of the document is understandable, which has been verified by the interpreter of the jurisdiction board as well. And later on, this victim was reclassified into protected victim. So it was edited to hint that undertaking was proven, which was not right. False translation was applied. Discussion was deemed to be classified. All the phones were ringing several times. I called my husband twice. In the meantime, he came back helping the dog, installing a chip under the skin of the dog. There is no indictment, no undertaking whatsoever, and there is no original tape material, voice recording. We have asked for the criminalistic analysis of the for recording. We have never received it. It has never been permitted. Almost nobody understood anything of the document, and then their own official translators said that not even 5% is understandable. As for my husband, attempting attempt or building a wall. 1 year before that, firecrackers costing 64 lei each. He ordered 20 for 2 fire parades. And the siren, joy, this is what the jurisdiction office, the prosecution office called detonator. The petardos have been sent by the Temeswar company. My husband never asked for that, never ordered that. In this quantity of petarda altogether, there's hardly 20 grams of explosive material. Still, prosecution officer is saying that half of the square would have been exploded by that, and they said they were able to prove that. Interestingly, why the authority sent much more than what was ordered by Beke and Zoltán. The gentleman there also said that my husband said that yes, we use the petarda and the detonator is an airsoft game, which he prepared more than 1 year before that. We proved that with photos. There were team logos, and it was installed. The 3 game modes were installed on that. When they did the house search, they didn't have a screwdriver to open that. If it was a detonator, it would have been applied better with devices. This is what they had to provide within 24 hours. Obviously, the tender, old nails and the firing tape they claimed to have found. This is how the Romanian authorities came to us of arresting Beke and Zoltán, and 1 month later, Zoltán, when he was transported for hearing, neither he was what the charges were. He never even knew when he was arrested. He was kept in detention for 6 months, pressing charges on the subject of attempting against the community. It was extended month after month because they were claimed to have meant a threat on the community. And they claimed that they had to conclude the pyrotechnic reviews, the investigations which they never informed us about. They were given psychological pressure. First they were blackmailing the family. What the families are doing in their absence. Then they listened to presentation about weapons, devices, how improvised explosive devices can be prepared. People try to influence them or encourage them to undertake things that they've got nothing to do with. In Bucharest, in the first month, even despite the fact that they had a clean record, they were locked up with criminals. There were 11 in a cell. For a fraction of that, the mother country, Hungary, would be blamed by the European Union for 1/10 of that. Going back to Ceausescu time, the same equipment was used. No lockable door on the toilet. Detainees installed a curtain so that there was any sign of civilization. The judge was a decent person in the first instance. Actually, against the attempt, they were acquitted by the judge. The Roman prosecutor's office was asking for the maximum punishment, influencing the judge, and also charging Szőcs Zoltán for having influenced the victims. He was acquitted from the major charge, but they needed some secondary excuse, therefore the petarda, and on the subject of the 2 firecrackers, he was charged for owning and using illegal unlawful pyrotechnics devices. It was in the original package, the petardos. I don't imagine there will be any other country in the world, where for owning petardos he will be imprisoned. He never used that, and he was charged with terrorism. We also proved that the order was sent in 2014, and the company sent the petardos in November, 1 year later, 2015. This was the typical Balkan case, but they tried to assimilate. After the decision of the first instance, we thought we had some faith in Romanian justice, but we wanted legal remedy in any case because we suffered a lot, and the savings of half the savings of our life had to be spent. In the meantime, our company was demolished as well. The secure technology permit of my husband was revoked. This was how we made a living through this company. He never planned any attempt. Prosecution said he planned it for the main square, the Gábor Árpád statue. Psychological review would have been justified, because who would put a bomb in his own bathroom to make the neighbor nervous? They made the attempt. When, with false accusations, they tried to demolish or collectively stigmatize families or proper people, and they timed the whole thing for June 15th of this year, his birthday. Then Beke István, in his last verse, said, "Distinguished court, having read the indictment, I said this couldn't be any worse, but I was wrong. What we heard from the prosecutor now goes beyond that. For 2.5 years now, I keep claiming I was innocent, and I always made the same that I did not commit any crime. I didn't commit the crime that I'm accused of. There is no deed. I have not undertaken anything. I have not made any preparations for preparing the device that the prosecution office demonstrated. I believe the prosecutor's office and the protected victim misled the court with the science fiction fantasy, the lies and misinterpretations. They did it in a way that none of the proofs were allowed to be shown that would have proven my right. Over thousands of people stood up for me, for my innocence. They took 11 months of my life, and they made our lives living hell without me having committed any crime. They've managed to prove that they can mock an innocent person the way they want, and you do not have a right to be innocent unless there is a decision. I'd like to ask the court to make justice. I am innocent. I want full acquitting and the reconstitution of my honesty and my name. Well, that did not happen. July 4th, the court, after the hearing, changed the legal categorization, not providing the right for defense, and finally committed 2 innocent people for prison. They have acquitted them for illegal use of the pyrotechnics devices, but they've already spent 11 months for that in prison. In a state of law, total ignorance of being innocent would not have happened, couldn't have happened without proofs to be sent to prison. Finally, they decided that something else has happened, and 4 months after they were in prison, they provided reasoning for why they were put in prison, and they also prevented the pleader, the defending attorney, to provide for defense. It can only happen in Romania that, in lack of proofs at basic level, the court acquits the subjects, and the second instance they commit them to prison in an innocent way at the second instance. Again, the call recordings could not be analyzed. It was rejected. public hearing or identification of the main victim, the protected victim, who himself claimed that he is identical with the participants. The results of the biotechnical analysis was not made known to us. They created proofs in an unlawfully legal way. The Directorate Against Organized Crime and Terrorism, 3 months after the protected victim providing the call recording, received a document from Secret Service with the charges referring to the secret protocol generated in 2009, which decrees to be declared unlawful. That's ongoing process in Romania currently. So these people have never admitted that there would be any crime. There is no proof. They have not undertaken anything. They have not done anything. Still, they were sent to prison. This way, on this basis, any household can be committed with terrorism. Only thing you need to say, I'm secular and I do not live in a state of law. If there was a police raid, there couldn't be any case because they would have found the right reason for sending them to prison for terrorism. Thank you very much for listening to me. I'd like to thank for the support of the Mother Nation and the Minority Legal Protection Institution, Mr. Alkainak Tamás, Ms. Morvai Kristina, petition of Kékes Rajmond, with more than 10,000 people signing up for that. All the NGOs and civilians and politicians in the mother country having backed us. In short, I'd like to elaborate on the thoughts of Predestina Mihai as to what has happened, legally speaking, in the Supreme Court and why this ruling was brought about. You need to bear in mind that the crime committed has never been part of the original prosecutor's documentation. Therefore, the judge rules that the crime was committed in order to threaten the Romanian community and to make sure that nobody will have such intentions to commit any such crime in Kézdivásárhely on December 1st. Later on, a totally different mode of operandi and mode of operation was set, different from the original prosecution documents. This makes the case even more questionable. So basically, the crime that Beke István was sent to court for and he was acquitted for, later on prosecution did that case with another charge which has never been part of the original prosecution document, although it was meant to be built up on each other. So in the indictment, the way of committing the crime now looks totally different. The request for the Directorate Against Terrorism was not about changing the legal classification based on Article 386, much rather they substituted that crime with another crime. The judgment of that crime was different from those outlined in the indictment, going against the compulsory laws of the Civil Code, Section 371, which stipulates that only the original crime and persons can be involved. So basically, the legal case was extended to another crime, and this crime doesn't even exist in the current set of rules. So briefly, that has happened at the highest level. Thank you very much for listening to me. And yes, we still believe in truth, and we still believe in God. You're chillo. Thank you very much for this shocking report. And now let's look into further details about the same case. The message is brought by Szőcs, Csongor, the Zoltán. Csongor, over to you. I'd like to sincerely welcome all the participants and also those who follow us online. First of all, I'd like to tell you that Zoltán, my brother's wife, is expecting your mother 8 months. She could not make it. I'd like to welcome you on her behalf as well. First of all, let me thank the associates of the Minority Legal Protection Institution for their efforts for raising awareness of this case, because their rights were infringed with very seriously, which is unprecedented and unworthy. So that we understand how we have gotten into the situation, let me give you a chronological outlook. As young people, with my brother, we organized ourselves in a movement which targeted the protection of the national values, the culture, the language of the indigenous Hungarian minority in Transylvania. In light of that, we organized national children's camps, cultural events, commemorative events. Hungarian language-wise, we achieved major success in Kézdivásárhely, in the shops and in institutions. Information boards became bilingual. Unfortunately, at that time in Kézdivásárhely, not even the opening hours were written in Hungarian. People are not prepared about the rights. They do not know what they are entitled to, what they are not. They usually harassed if a shop uses Hungarian language. So the city, Kézdivásárhely, has become bilingual within 1 month. That was a major success that we achieved. We have helped Hungarian families living under difficult conditions after the flood. We gave blood. The Romanian state provides money for blood donation, and we bought Christmas gifts for poor families based on that. And as it was stipulated in the indictment as well, my brother said it's not possible without blood. Well, that was a hint for blood donation. And they interpreted the statement that we wanted human sacrifice for the betterment of the Hungarian people living in Kézdivásárhely. These programs were extended year after year, and we helped organizations fighting for the betterment of secular land. In 2007, we executed the voting for Kézdivásárhely. We protected our rights when the secular flag was meant to be removed. We ourselves put them on again in Kézdivásárhely ourselves. Authorities from the start on have neglected our individual and citizen rights, harassing us, threatening our families following us, tapping our telephones, threatening the directors of our schools and so forth. Financial sanctions kept improving year after year. Left it open even if we did not participate in protest. Example, 3 Kézdivásárhely inhabitants were sanctioned, penalized for the March 15th secular celebration, even if the people were not even in the city. We were given our punishment despite. They never apologized for that, and there's always been a list about that, and they punished us based on the list. It didn't matter where we were and what we did or did not. These are the conditions that we have to fight against. Day after day, the situation is getting worse, actually. As it turns out, from 2010 onwards, the Romanian Secret Service, with the court's permit, they started to monitor us, and we became national security risks in our own country. And this was an obstacle in the homogenization processes which they started officially. The Romanian press started to write about terrorists living in Székelyföld. They must swear. Zoltán and Beke, István, they kept mentioning us. Ever since then, with court permit, they monitored us. Vasalberg books, national flags, diplomas, T-shirts, and a few lei or a few foreign worth petardas could show as proofs. This was sufficient for them and for the Romanian Secret Service to increase its national budget by 20%. In the indictment, any organizations, persons, living or dead persons who are doing or have done something for the national cause of Hungary, they called them terrorists. Consequently, this issue is not only about Zoltán and István, but that of the whole nation. I'm truly happy that the Moldova Republic honored us with their presence as well, because in the indictment it's been mentioned that our twin organizations, sometimes on a friendly basis, based on the Romanian prosecution, we wanted to overthrow the Romanian government with them, so that we would live there, Hungarians and Moldavians together. We knew that it was beyond our limits, so we informed all the parties, political organization, politicians that we assumed would be in a position to help us. We were successful in negotiating with the Hungarian consuls in Romania. We maintain very good relations with the consulate, and every week or every 2 weeks they visit them in the Csíksárda prison, just like he did Fekete, the prison. Penyuszki Anna, special thanks to her. I've met her in Bucharest, the embassy, personally, and she participated at each one of the hearings after that, and they continuously informed the foreign ministry about that, the developments. I'd also like to mention that this process was made easier because by providing the Hungarian citizenship, the Hungarian could use this tool as well for fighting for their justice, and give us the possibility to become Hungarian citizens. With my brother, we came to Gyöngyös and we arranged the necessary documentation because it would have been very difficult back home. When we came home, we were given plenty of questions how to do that, to help us. And my brother took it so seriously that he arranged that for all the family members, told all the friends what documents where to file and so on. And in the indictment, it is stipulated that this was instigation, incitement, trying to convince everybody to give a Romanian citizenship and replace that for Hungarian. Thanks to Morvai Köztén support, there was a documentary film prepared in Kézdi Vásárhely that was published. Thank you very much for that. And Kulcsák Eszter József, Tőkés László, Fay László, and the other representatives of Transylvania worked in order to protect us. Csóti György, the everyday mental and spiritual support in hard times. Thank you very much for that. I would like to thank for the visit Beke István, Beke Zoltán, Talos István, Mayor of Budapest, for the visits in the prison. And last but not least, I'd like to thank all the individuals and organizations for their support who have done anything for us. The lawyer of my brother sent me a message There are three parts to this issue. On the one hand, the call recordings. The alleged October 10th meeting was recorded by the protected victim. Next request, defense was not accepted concerning the alleged conversation on October 10th. To have the written up version of the call recording, to define where exactly this discussion was held, how it was recorded, the criminalistic analysis of the call recording identifying the participants. It's never been accepted. Sándor was a protected victim, a cooperating person, cooperating with the authority, handed over the CD. The written version of the conversation is not right. Translation was made into Romanian, which is unlawful because the conversation was made in Hungarian. Beke Szabolcs, kézdivásárló citizen, managed to write it up, but they do not have the professional background for that or identify people. They do not have a right for that as well. In the presence of translator, only 5% was understandable. Therefore, the interpreter could not translate that. Therefore, the official translation has never been prepared. Secondly, listening to Sándor József, the protected victim, who in theory was present at the discussion. Beke Szabolcs, kézdivásárló citizen, made the same statement concerning the timing and the content of the conversation. Prosecution office listened to several persons as victims. Withdrawing the right from Szőcs István and Beke István for a fair negotiation. So the requests for defense were rejected. Thirdly, changing the legal categorization by the prosecution office. Prosecution office's request is unfounded because the current categorization based on which they were convicted is not in line with why they were arrested. They were kept in custody for 6 months, and defense requested in vain to discuss the case of changing the legal categorization of the charge. The only proof for the prosecution office has for the court to judge against them is that conversation. It is still undefined who participated and what it was. We proved it with victims that Zoltán did not stay in kézdivásárhely on October 10th. It was ignored, accepting the call recording, and the reasoning was that the location of the call recording and the method and the participants and the exact time is not relevant, only what was said there. They stated that, despite the fact that not even 5% was understandable of that. Plus, it was translated into Romanian from Hungarian. So, based on that conversation, they were convicted. 2 innocent people were convicted. The content is not known, the date is not known, the location is not known, and the participants are not known as of today. Further legal steps. The appeal, or like I said, after 4 months, the reasoning was posted to us. Having reviewed that, we have submitted a request at the end of November for the Supreme Neutralizing Court referring to the changed legal charge and outlining the right of the people for fair treatment. Finally, I'd like to make a point here. This is the last thought from the lawyer, that I'm totally disappointed in our judges because they acted upon the orders of others, ignoring the human rights. And this is a message from my brother. Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for all the support, moral and material support, and all the steps in order to make justice for us, because without cooperation there is no success. Without success there is no victory. I'm carrying the burden of this cross. It's shared with you. It's easier for me and for my family because every suffering makes sense and there's an end to that. God save our Hungarian homelands, and I'd like to wish blessed holidays for all my Hungarian patriots and brothers. your report, which was no less dramatic. One thing I will highlight here. Romanian chauvinism, in fact, has crossed the border threshold when Romanian lawyer reacts to the events and the ruling in such a way. And as I heard, he listened to the unjust ruling with tears in his eyes, the upsetting judgment. That shows that even Romanians realize that. And hopefully we'll have more and more such Romanian citizens in the future. And now, let's look at the legal analysis of these issues from European professional lawyer Grad András, lawyer Dr. Grad András. The title is Comments on a Human Rights Issue. András, the floor is yours. I'd like to sincerely welcome everybody. Hopefully you can hear what I'm saying. Well, I'm somewhat of an alien element here. I'm a pragmatic human rights expert. I used to work in Strasbourg. Morvai Christina followed me at that time. So we were raised in the same place concerning human rights. And in this capacity of mine, I was given the honor, I had the honor of being asked by the Minority Legal Protection Institution to represent the Beke and Zoltán issue in Strasbourg. Never have I been any more popular to the socialist government filing human rights issues and winning activities, just like I file it with the current government, and fortunately I also win from time to time. I do not belong anywhere. I'm a human rights expert, and if it happened to a guy called Popescu or Iordanescu in Hungary, if the same thing would have happened to him in Hungary, then I would be just as much determined trying to fight for human rights in that case. What this force say? I'd like to indicate so that we understand what the whole thing is about. Permit me to take a step back, otherwise there will be danger of falling into Hungary when on TV from time to time I see that intelligent people are bragging about taking their case to Strasbourg, and honestly, in the meantime, they do not have any material knowledge about the Strasbourg procedures. They have overly high hopes. Therefore, at this take a step back so that you understand what this whole Strasbourg is about. I'll promise to make it brief. When back in 1950, the European Court for Human Rights and the European Rights Court was established, and we were right after the Second World War. And after this bitter experience, they realized that it is not sufficient to make it an internal issue for each one of the member states whether they adhere to the human rights, because the Third Reich, the Third Empire, they adhered their own rules, but they still managed to eradicate millions of people and putting Europe to flame. So this cannot possibly be the only internal issue of member states. Therefore, the founding fathers decided to establish this human rights umbrella organization, the Court of Human Rights, protecting human rights, all the rights that are outlined in the European Charter of Human Rights. I need to add here, the European Charter of the Human Rights is rather brief. It's about 4 pages. It is only the most essential rules stipulated there, and the Human Rights Court is operating based on incident case. So, without knowing the procedure right and the legal way of operating, Strasbourg, you shouldn't even turn to Strasbourg. What is Strasbourg about? In many cases it's mixed up with, the European Union is mixed up with European Council. These are similar because both have organizations in Strasbourg, but Those are two totally different organizations. The European Union is like the elite, while European Council decades ago has included the whole of Europe. I worked there between 1992 and 94 when Hungary, by far not member of the Union, we were members of that too, and everybody else that have been members ever since. Here's the essence. Very often it's misunderstood what the Human Rights Court can do. Very often it's I will go to Strasbourg, and I trust that the Hungarian jurisdiction, the judgment will be evoked or changed. Well, I should forget about that. European Court, Human Rights Court will never evoke any member state ruling, and it will not change that either, because it is not empowered to do so. The Human Rights Court can do two things. On the one hand, categorize the request unacceptable, that's the worst case, and that, unfortunately, is one of the possibilities. We cannot turn to the Human Rights Court, just like Pallas Athene popping out a head of Zeus, stating that we are the only chance for us to win. No. The Human Rights Court is entitled, when seeing that one of the member states infringing with the European Rights Charter, then it states the infringement against the human rights of that member state, and simultaneously it rules that the subject should be paid sanction. It is not like the Hungarian or the Romanian court's decision being evoked or changed. It cannot be done. Instead, if Hungary or Romania infringe with the European Charter on Human Rights, and the subject who suffered that will be judged to be paid remedy. Italy, for example, pays quite a huge amount of the national budget, huge portion, for paying compensation for Italian citizens because of overly lengthy law cases. I have also seen 100 million euro worth compensation. So very serious, very high amounts of compensations might emerge. It depends on what legal infringement we are talking about, obviously. Of course, I cannot tell if and when we win. That usually is my goal. If we win, what the total amount would be in this case for Beke, István and Zoltán. But in any case, in light of the Hungarian experiences, these amount to millions of forints or tens of millions of forints from case to case. But again, it is not money that is my major motivation, but stating the legal. What we're working on right now specifically is that the European Court of Human Rights should judge against Romania in this case. Thank you. It was not meant to be a punchline. In fact, that is our goal. In fact, that is why we are working. Just like we did the same thing when a Hungarian citizen infringed with in Hungary in '98. I won the case for Hungarian citizens against the Hungarian government back in '98. Statement. And feel free to hate me for that, but that's my function. Unfortunately, in this specific case, it's so tangible that we have a good chance that Romania would be voted against, but I still cannot tell you that it will be done easily and it's guaranteed. And I cannot state that Romania will be judged against in 100% likelihood, but I can tell you what the problem is and why I think there's a real chance for us to win. As outlined by the relatives, it was mentioned that in the process on second instance there was a modification of the charge. The Human Rights Court of the European Union. There's Article 6. I do not like to read it out, but this I will not improvise myself. The essence is that the fair treatment, entitlement fair treatment, is Article 6. It says everybody is entitled to be judged fairly by an independent court within rational, reasonable time, and to bring about resolution. And to state that the indictment should be well-founded, legally speaking. Second bullet, any person suspected with a crime is to be assumed innocent as long as the guilt is not proven legally. And there's a third bullet. Section B of that is important to us, and that reads like this. Any person suspected having committed a crime is entitled at least for having the time and means of preparing his or her defense. In our case, this is the most problematic issue, because in the process, in the first instance, basically two accusations were made against Beke, István, Szőcs, Zoltán. The more serious of that related to that the court, first instance, did not make them guilty. As it happens, they stated exactly as many days as they spent in previous arrest. Well, that happens in Hungary as well. Just by accident, if you spent half a year preliminary custody and the court has doubts about innocence, then he will be judged for 6 months and he will be released immediately when judgment is made and announced. Unfortunately, we are not faultless either. So let's not assume that Hungary is a true example of state of Hungary's voted against and ruled against in Strasbourg in a regular case as well. Let's not try to pretend that everything is in perfect order back. A good patriot is to recognize and publish these facts as well, in order to avoid that in the future from happening, to prevent that from happening or avoid that in the future. So I'm not saying the problems should be shoveled under the carpet. That would not be the solution. When I worked in Strasbourg back at the time for a couple of years, the objective was not to prevent Hungary from being ruled against. Much rather, we want to make it clear to avoid that in the future. So, back to the specific case. Well, they were acquitted in first instance. On the second instance, which, by the way, passed the ruling as well, the charge was modified. Not exactly for the original prosecution or original charge. It's difficult to state. Using the Hungarian terminology, although I'm not that much well versed about Romanian, right? Unfortunately, I need to do it in order to be efficient. This is why I went to Bucharest specifically for a day to meet the legal representative of the convicted persons there, so that I can discuss it with them in person, how it goes, what happens in Romanian law, and it's still not 100% clear because the Romanian lawyers explain that differently. It looks like the Romanian law is somewhat foggy in this sense, whether the charge, amendment charge modification, what possibilities there are for that. But the bottom line is that at the last hearing, the charge was modified, and defense did not have the ample time and no appropriate tools to prepare against this modified charge. So it looks like Romania, with this attitude, with this behavior, infringed with the Section 6 of the European Rights of human rights of the European Union, and there are some further problems as well. However, I will focus on that because this is most promising, if I may say. Most promising among the legal infringement. There are some other problems as well. Example, undercover agents. They are applied by police in every country. Why should Romania be an example? There wouldn't be any problem with that by itself. However, there's the practice within the Human Rights Court of the European Union that they're thinking case by case, thousands of cases or tens of thousands. That the legal practice of the Human Rights Court of the European Union is evolving, and this is inevitable to know so that we can turn to Strasbourg successfully. It's in vain to ask when the judge is inhumane when treating me. Can I turn to Strasbourg based on the case law, the third section of the chart, which is about inhumane approach and torture? If the judge speaks down upon somebody, this still doesn't exploit the third section of human rights. It's not enough for that. And we only know that based on the knowledge of our case law, because based on the agreement, if the judge talks down upon me, then I will win in Strasbourg. No, you will not, because there's legal practice going back to several decades that there are physical abuses or serious mental deprivation. That would take university course to discuss all the details of that. But legally speaking, in case of an undercover agent, what procedure the court must follow, and in this case the practice is that whenever an undercover agent, or based on the report of the undercover agent or based on evidence gathered by him, we want to convict somebody, then for the defense the right must be provided to pose questions to this undercover agent. But how will an agent be undercover so that you can put questions to them? Obviously you can unveil this undercover agent and escorting him in the courtroom. So normally he's in another room, you do not see his face. This is what happened in the Romanian case as well. If defense can put questions to this agent, and if he answers these questions, then the defense's rights are fulfilled. So we need to decide about things like this in the procedure. To what extent did Romania adhere to these human rights expectations? Looks like on the subject of undercover agent, we are pretty much right. We couldn't really find a problem, no matter how much we would like to do that, because they pretty much kept the rules of the game. However, the same statement cannot be made about the process of the investigation. As it was mentioned before, even if the Human Rights Court is not the court of fourth instance case doesn't work. If you lose it at the first instance, second instance, and then revision, appeal, then I go to Strasbourg and find my truth. No, that doesn't work like that. Such cases end up in the waste bin. So the Human Rights Court usually doesn't overrule the judgment, the ruling of the national courts. At the same time, the irregularity of the process might raise their interest if there are different legal infringements that by themselves, individually, would not be significant enough from the human. All in all, the Human Rights Court, and they might state that the first section of paragraph 6, the entitlement for the fair treatment, is infringed with. Therefore, in the Beke case, we are exploring the facts because there were some things that by themselves, individually, Human Rights Court would not state that listening to the call recording was not done the way it was, interpretation wasn't adequate enough, or translation wasn't adequate enough, or the call recording wasn't understandable enough. But if there is a worrisome call recording on the one hand, plus, on top of that, everything else that's taken into consideration as proves that they've been having that for many years. Nobody deals with that. That the nails, for example, that they found in the studio, in the workshop, and they say it's part of the future bomb. All of us have a few nails in our household. So with that assumption, under that assumption, we could all be accused of preparing for a terrorist attack, all the households. So when these problems surface in a high number in the procedure, then I'd like to think that we'd like to reach the threshold of evoking the attention of the Human Rights Court concerning Section 6 as well, not only the right for defense but also the fair nature of the process. That will be part of our human rights case. I will have to leave pretty soon. I would like to stop here for a minute, and Jury, if you permit me, if and when somebody has questions to me, in my remaining few minutes, I'd like to answer so that after that I will have to leave. Can I do that, Jury? So then, if you permit me, it doesn't have to be a question. An old-timer university lecturer. I'm used to 400 people, students listening to me. I'm not insulted if there's no question. However, if there is one, or if there are questions, I'll be happy to. Thank you then. Thank you for the attention. Thank you for the presentation of the Cloud András. Now we have a more clear vision about Strasbourg, what to expect in Strasbourg and what not to expect from Strasbourg. It's very important that András would be successful. Not only should he be proud of the past successes, but hopefully he will be proud of this success as well. Now, after the legal questions, we'll go back to the level of politics. Before we do that, I'd like to welcome Mr. Deutsch Tamás, European Parliament MP. In Romania, Romanian chauvinism makes tremendous efforts, huge efforts, to revoke the autonomy of Hungarian community, to implant fear in the minds of people. Now, what is the connection between Transylvania community and what is the interrelation of that with the Romanian political power? Páncél Károly will tell us about that, from the National Assembly, chairman of National Cohesion Committee. Well, I believe that the role of settlers is not over yet. This heroic nation in the future will have a mission, and therefore I believe that we are making a huge national mistake, letting this nation die away. Quote from Orbán Balázs. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to greet conference participants. I'd like to thank Mr. Csóti György and the Legal Protection Institute for dealing with specifically the Beke Szőcs issue and in general the situation of Hungarians in Carpathian Basin, that we can talk about that, and I believe there will have to be continuation to that in the future. This will have to be continued. I'd like to thank the family members a lot for possibility to meet them here in Budapest. Thank you for the report, and it was very touching when Csongor interpreted his brother's Christmas well-wishings and greetings And I believe, on our behalf, we would love to hug Beke, István and Szőcs Zoltán here in Budapest during the Advent period of 2018 for everything that has happened to them in the past, and to thank for everything that they were trying to do for the Hungarian community in Transylvania in the past few decades. Ladies and gentlemen, Inuits, Eskimos, in other words, know hundreds of words about snow and ice that surround them. They have hundreds of terms. The Sami community in Finland and Scandinavia, they have 180 to 300 for expressing snow quality, ice quality, to what extent it's frozen and how it has fallen. I know it's somewhat surprising, this topic is somewhat surprising, may seem to be surprising at the first glance, but when we say that over the border, across the border, Hungarians or Hungarians in the other country, we do have the special terms for diaspora, islands. We could go on listing that because unfortunately that's our immediate environment in the past 100 years. These expressions and terms crystallized around us, and to elaborate on something else, the outcome of which, well, I need to speak about Trianon and the past 100 years of history, because the Beke Szőcs case is a consequence of that as well. We have almost 100 years, 98 years behind us, and if you think back, your grandfathers, our fathers' lives and period, then there are so many things expressed in this single word, Trianon. 2 lost world wars, different colors of different dictatorships, then the so-called liberation, which were in fact occupations, and plenty of cases, Marina Hedvig, Beke Szőcs case, but also the cyanide catastrophe, and I could go listing all the consequences and cases. The secular collegium, basis for all of that is that outrageous peace pact, Trianon. We need to talk about that because in the past few weeks the centennial date was mentioned often. On the one hand, in the past few years we have commemorated the devastating battles of the First World War in the frame of the centennial events, whereby secular Székely and Hungarian soldiers became icons and showed a good example about patriotism. And in the past weeks, another centenary, the Gyula-Fehérvár statement, which was released exactly 100 years ago, although we all realize that other than that, this is the basis for Romanian identity, the Gyula-Fehérvár declaration, but in international law that plays no role whatsoever, just like December 22nd there was the Cluj or Kolo declaration when Hungarians have gotten together and they made a declaration stating that Transylvania is or intends to remain part of Hungary. Also, no relevance of that. In international law, what is important was not the Gyula-Fehérvár declaration, but Trianon, the peace treaty, and later on the Paris Peace Accord after the Second World War. Well, 100 years later, it is also worthwhile mentioning that also specific circumstances around Trianon at that time here in Hungary. Not too many words are said about that, although these days there are studies raised about that as to how we have gotten into a situation where both politically and military speaking we were totally exposed to internal factors in 1918. On the one hand, we had this defeat, the war defeat, military defeat behind us, and 300,000 well-trained well-armored soldiers returned from the front, although we've had immense losses, much more immense than later in the Second World War, but there was a substantial military force which was well-trained, which was armored, and also orchestrated by the leaders. So this military power was evaporated. Binder Mela, Ministry of Warfare, he disarmed the soldiers. He didn't want to see any soldiers later on. Turned out that he was a secret agent, Serbian-Hungarian secret agent. Kaldi Mihai, who returned from the USA at that time. He came home, returned to Hungary through France. How interesting. Just like Vladimir Ilyich returned from Switzerland with German assistance, went back to Russia to take Russia out of the war. And there was the assassination against Tiso István, Prime Minister. He was a state head of state, who even at that time could have been a responsible leader of Hungary. He was the person who was assassinated on the day of the Autumn Rose Revolution. He was killed and removed. And then, back in 1990, that was the communist takeover of power, which again was so strange. Communists were handed over the power, who were in the prison at that time by Károly, and when the communist commune was declared, not too far from Budapest in Pécs, there were French Entente forces. 1 or 2 battalions would have been sent up to Budapest, and order could have been restructured, reconstituted, and the Entente forces could send tens of thousands of their army to the Soviet-Russian era. In Budapest, very close to Budapest, they didn't do that. So, basically, I can say that Trianon was no accident. Didn't just come by accident. Under these conditions, being exposed both in a military sense and politically, we're put in the situation that this Carpathian Basin-based country was torn apart, and the reason why we're here now is that millions of our fellow Hungarians became minorities. We couldn't swallow that, and we also couldn't spit it out, this trauma that we suffered in Trianon. However, we have answers for Trianon, and maybe Tibor Toro, who is here with us, and I'd like to, well, as one of the leaders of the Hungarian People's Party in Transylvania. A couple of weeks ago, you will recall, there was a conference held here in Budapest, invited by the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister turned to the leaders of the across the border Hungarians. He said that 100 years of loneliness is over now. We realize, we know this book about 100 years of loneliness, leaving paradise, leaving homeland, and the words of the Prime Minister were encouraging, because ever since 2010 the Hungarian national policy or politics took a turn, whereby in fact we can state that Hungarians living across the border in the torn apart parts is not left alone. The 100 years of loneliness is over. And we also heard Szili Katalin here, the assigned person by the Prime Minister on autonomy issues, and she mentioned the new Hungarian base law, which in section D stipulates the responsibility that we carry, which, by the way, in the National Assembly, in the Eszterházy room, there is a Szabó Dezső statue there with the title, "Every Hungarian is responsible for every Hungarian." So this thought comes back in the new Hungarian base law, new Hungarian constitution, and in order to continue on this line about how to bear responsibility, it is also declared that the Hungarian communities and the self-governance or autonomy of Hungarians living across the border is supported as well. So, the Constitution, the base law, obliges us to support autonomy. We have passed laws passed a law in 2010 about extending the Hungarian citizenship, dual citizenship. That's also a reply and answer to Trianon, and also for December 5th, 2004. So the election law has changed as well, because all those who do not have permanent residence in Hungary, but they are still Hungarian citizens, can participate at the national election. So the nation's unification, legally speaking, has taken place. And now I will speak about the non-legal framework within the category of nation unification. Preserving culture, identity, and how it is supported, that's well known to everybody. How new Hungarian houses or community spaces are brought about, are built across the border. How education is being supported. How enrollment in schools is made easier, or what professional assistance is provided to Hungarian language education. And many of you may have heard about the historic process that we call Carpathian Basin kindergarten building program. It's of historical importance, because the last time such institutional development was realized took place in Hungary between the two world wars, when Klebersberg started to build people's schools, and now kindergartens are being built outside the Hungarian border. 150 new Hungarian kindergartens are built, and more than 400 of such kindergartens were renewed. So preserving our language, preserving, maintaining our culture is not enough. Providing for kindergartens is not sufficient, trusting that kids will be enrolled in Hungarian kindergartens and Hungarian schools, but also you have to make sure that adults, the parents, can make good living in their homeland, that they can stay home, they can make a living there. And this is why the economy boosting programs are launched over the national border areas. It started in the southern part with 20 billion foreign support based on a bidding process, and it continued in Subcarpathian with 15 billion, the northern part 5 billion each. Also, in case of smaller Hungarian communities, Mura and Drava, and next year it will be launched in Transylvania with 25 billion foreign, because considering the number of settlers, we're talking about the biggest block, that's 74 million euros to start with. This is the kick-off year, the year of the launch. This is conditioned upon the area of the secular region, CK Fold, so that people can stay there, can live there well, and make a living there. Currently, one can state that we are in the process of rebuilding, restructuring the Carpathian Basin. We are one unified educational place with Komárom, Beregszás, Újvidék, Novi Sad, the European Collegium, Sapienza University, Partium University. There are educational institutions of high level maintained by Hungarians which are available. So we are becoming more and more of space. We can state that we will be an economic space as well, because the mother country provides support. We reach the borders with motorways, trail tracks, train tracks are building, gas pipelines and so forth. So the natural geographical unit that used to be one unit before now is becoming one educational, one single economic region again. I also have to make mention about the demographic situation, because that's our second biggest problem. The number of Hungarians is decreasing. Not only is it emigration, but also there's a low number of children born. That's characteristic for Europe as well. We have the specific family support scheme here in Hungary, trying to overcome this demographic crisis, and we try to extend that across the border for the Hungarians living there as well. From January 1st onwards, a program called Rail Accords, fantasy name, cord that connects mother and baby. We have extended the maternity support to across the border as well. Whenever a child is born, one-off amount is paid, and the baby bond, which is like a deposit that all the babies are entitled to until the age of 18. Money earns good return there. All the kids who are born as Hungarian citizens across the border as well. So that's our reply. That's an answer to triangle, but the real answer for triangle would be autonomy. Autonomous, this is the Greek expression, self-governance it means. So, the national minorities, for them to remain in existence, autonomy is the public law framework for that. And all nations and every part of nations have the entitlement for existence. The existence of minorities not only is autonomy the accepted way, but that's the evident solution as well in European law. All we ask from neighboring nations for Hungarians living there is the general accepted normal European right, in line with the recommendations of the Union. Our aspirations for autonomy are not against anybody, not against the interest of anybody. Wherever autonomy has been provided for, it is clearly tangible that it provides a boost and impetus both spiritually and culturally, economically. New resources are liberated. We can also experience there that wherever autonomy was provided for, the minority lives properly in peace, they feel at home there. So autonomy therefore brings about social level peace and prosperity, and not only for the minority but for the majority as well. The majority also needs to be convinced about that, and unfortunately this doesn't only hold true for Romania but also Slovakia, Subcarpathian, Ukraine and so forth. That holds true everywhere. The majority has to be convinced about this not being separatism. Freedom can be distributed to others as well. If freedom is provided and distributed, the Romanians will not have less freedom. This brings about prosperity, and the secular land, Székely land, could build the fairy tale land again that the majority can benefit from as well. There is the individual based autonomy, which is the cultural autonomy. This is about use of the mother tongue, cultural and exercising religious identity. This is what we wish for Pácium, Balvány and all the other sporadic areas. And there's the regional autonomy, whereby the community living in one state would have the self-autonomy, self-governing right. This entitlement would be provided. There are numerous European examples for that. We keep referring to the happy Western Europe, the happier part of Europe, or the autonomy of South Tyrol, or the Finnish Swedes living in Finland, or Danish people, the Danes living in Germany. So that's common practice in Europe. But not only there, I'd also like to welcome the diplomats from Moldavia, because in Moldavia, the Galos of Turkish origin have autonomy, enjoy autonomy. So, how to put it this way, countries with even more sad historic traditions in Eastern Europe, there is a good example for existing autonomy and highly well-functioning autonomy. Autonomy, by the way, also has the right, or has the feature of preserving people. Not only does it slow down emigration, but people are kept in one place, because this also brings about economic boosting. Ladies and gentlemen, truly, Toro Tibor could tell us much more about the European or Transylvanian inspirations for autonomy. Just like the international law expert said, we could spend days with one presentation. However, let me give you a short summary of that. Between 1920 and 40, there were such aspirations as well. This is the period, by the way, when in 2019 the Hungarians in Transylvania found themselves broken without any support, broken down in a hostile environment which was unknown to them so far. And it was 1922 when, among others, led by Óskára, the Hungarian People's Party was formed, later on National Hungarian People's Party, who at the next election tried to coordinate their efforts with the Romanian People's Party. And they signed the so-called Csúcsa Pact. This Csúcsa Pact, if you read about that, would be the top of cultural autonomy. And Hungarians were hoping that they would be successful in the elections, and in that hostile environment, being minority, they will still achieve some results. But what happened is that even if they've made it to the Bucharest National Assembly, still the Romanian People's Party won in such a high amount that they didn't need the Hungarians. Well, they immediately forget about the Csúcsa Pact. This, by the way, holds true for the Balkan or Byzantine type of policy or politics making. By the way, obviously the Hungarians living in Transylvania knew about the revisionist policy of the mother country, and they were waiting. There's always some hope among the Transylvanian Hungarians. They still waiting, and 1944 there was the second Vienna ruling. Again they were waiting. If that holds true for North Transylvania, we'll wait, and maybe South Transylvania would follow. Well, this is not what happened. There were the terrors of the Second World War, and after 45, communist power came, which, interestingly, was partially proletarist and internationalist, and some Soviet elements were copycatted, but they were extremist, nationalist and chauvinistic as well. And this dictatorship, they couldn't really have maintained hopes anymore. Even if 1952 the Hungarian autonomous colony was established, it was just per se autonomous. This was like the autonomous republics in the Soviet Union. It was just quasi-autonomous, and 1960 Háromszék was allocated away, the majority of Hungarians there, and this Maros autonomous region was maintained for 8 more years. Well, even our generation might recall what has happened after that. Ceausescu came, the awful dictatorship of him, which at the end of the 80s culminated in eliminating villages, destroying villages. Basically, nationalism was at its peak, and I can state that by looking around in the Carpathian Basin, strong nationalism and chauvinism and the forced assimilation held true in all the neighboring countries except for Hungary and except for the GDR, German Democratic Republic. Romania was a very much nationalistic power. The forced upon assimilation, or people being chased away from their hometowns, home villages. I like to say here that there was a time when there were 2.5 million Hungarians living in Transylvania, then 1.8, now it's down to 1.4. But same holds true for the Csalókos, Hungarian minority as well. When a nation is lessening, that is always the guilt of the majority. And then, within the autonomy aspirations, there was 1989 change of the regime in Romania. Everybody had high hopes again. This is when the RMDS, Romanian Hungarian Democratic Association, established, and 1990 the pogrom in Marosvásárhely, which broke down high hopes again. Between 1990 and 2003, RMDS has been the only political player, Hungarian political player. Let's be honest here, they couldn't achieve any results there. For example, in Cluj-Kolozsvár, the independent Hungarian university, Boya University, and basically autonomy was not any high priority of an issue for the party. No accident, therefore, that in 2003 the secular National Council, as well as the Transylvanian National Councils and the Transylvanian Hungarian People's Party were established, and we could talk for hours about that. What autonomy concept there was, how the Hungarians were disputing which of these concepts should be submitted, which should not be, which is better, which is worse, and from that point onwards the Romanians didn't even want to hear about autonomy. So all they had to do was lean back and ask for one more cup of coffee. Easy for them. 2007, again, high hopes, because Romania has joined the European Union. And Hungarians in Transylvania, well, some of them sent a message to the Hungarian nationalists and do not vote in favor of Romania, ask for autonomy first. The second half sent a different message: keep cool, keep your cool. We see the Western European examples. In the EU, who will be given what we are entitled to based on the UN and human rights declarations and the EU directives. Keep your cool, we shall be given our. So first we need to be EU members, freely permeable. Frontiers, borders, and vote yes. I still have doubts what the good decision would have been, but no doubt we've had high expectations. And we were disappointed. After 11 years after Romania's EU accession, we can state that the situation of Hungarians became worse. More Hungarian rights are infringed with, and they became more hostile against Hungarians. And they joined NATO. They are always the first-class student. They always turn to the United States asking for their guidance. But they are even to play against them as well, trick them as well, because in the US there was a resolution made in the Senate that the restitution tasks that they are committed to should be implemented, and obviously, based on the law, they could demonstrate that, but we can list all the individual cases or the pressure of Hungarian diplomacy. We do not approve your OPEC association as long as you do not arrange the Catholic high schools issue. Okay, we do that. And 2 weeks later they say that the Székely Bíbó Collegium you're not entitled to, and they find a legal reference on that sheet of ownership sheet. It doesn't say reformist village, but it starts with the word college. And they're saying it is not necessarily a religious institution that you're entitled to. In January 2018, another important milestone regarding European autonomy, because RMDS, the Transylvanian Hungarian People's Party, the civic party's representatives could finally sit down around joint table, and 25 years after the Kolozsvár-Cluj declaration they confirmed, that was 1992, they confirmed that they will take a common stance for autonomy. So the autonomy concept is shaping up. Autonomy, by the way, is key to any solution. The concept of autonomy of the European parties is that it should be within a framework of Székelyföld, secular land. This is where historic autonomy should be developed. Partium would be entitled for dual language, public administration, special historic status, and cultural autonomy for the whole of the Hungarian community. And let's confirm that from here, from Budapest, Székelyföld terra secolorum is not against the regional integrity of Romania or the national sovereignty, much rather one of the major preconditions to that. One more example about the Romanian Public Administration Law Book. This law book has been submitted to the Bucharest Constitution. There were stipulations there, like with a municipality resolution, the minority rights can be applied even if the ratio decreases to below 20%. Above 20%, the names of streets, parks, has to be bilingual, or mother tongue can be used. The public utilities and all the other institutions. So the acquired mother tongue related rights should not be revoked, even if the ratio goes down to below 20%. Nice thoughts. In European cultures, it should be evident, but the Constitutional Court rejected that, stating that it's against the Constitution. The Joint European and Civic Initiative, or RMDS, was mentioned, Minority Safe Pack. I'd like to express gratitude to all of those who, in the spring, the autograph collection, we signed up for that, because it was a major task to collect more than 1 million signatures in at least 7 European countries. That has happened, and the mother country could also provide the appropriate necessary number of the signatures. It was not easy, because in the meantime there was the election campaign as well, and everybody was rushing around different sheets, hunting for signatures, bombarding the electors. But it has been done, and now the intent of the word is to wait for the new European Union elections, and they will not submit it to this European Union government anymore next year. By November next year, all the other bodies will be re-elected, and then it will be worthwhile to submit it. Looks like, by the way, the current European Union deals with many things, for example, shapes of cucumber, or custom, tax rules, migration, minorities, but not indigenous national minorities. Would like the European Union to deal eventually with their own nationals who have been here for hundreds or even 1,000 years. Coming back to the Gyulafehérvár Declaration, the text of which obviously is well known to you. 100 years ago, the Romanians declared that for all the coexisting and co-living nations, full-scale independence using their own languages they're entitled to, and in ratio of the population, all nationalities will be given the right to represent themselves in the National Assembly. Well, or submitted a draft now. By the way, the declaration made by the Romanians was formed into a decree, and they want this promise to be delivered in real terms. Appropriate jobs in the government representing the ratio of minorities, minority education, self-government, rights to develop, special statuses, the possibility for creating autonomies, and they submitted to that. I can pretty much foresee that they will listen to the arguments, at least, and possibly they will listen, and that's progress. Autonomy, concept-wise, we didn't even reach the level of hearing. They didn't even read the submission. They immediately rejected. I'd like to highlight the name of Kulcsár Terza József, MP, member of the Hungarian Civic Party, representing RMDS, working in Bucharest. Recently, he has submitted an autonomy draft, at least he was listened to in the Senate and also the lower house. Distinguished conference members, coming back to the Beke Szőcs case. As one of the outcomes of Trianon, one more time, I'd like to thank for having established this conference, and it is our job to progress that, to take it to the European level and to organize forums about that at the European level. Let's bring European folk dancers there. Bake them chimney cake. Let's take the story of the concept prejudice pair, prejudice law case as well. Let's raise awareness about that. And as a conclusion, let me quote Apostle Paul, first letter to Timotheus. Normally it is addressed to families, but we have a bigger community here as well. If somebody fails to take care of his own and denies faith, is worse than non-believer. Well, in our household there is Beke and Zoltán family as well, and the Hungarians in the Carpathian Basin, so let's not be infidels. Let's continue to be caring for them. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for this overview about politics and political history. Just in case somebody failed to know something why Romanian politics is against all the autonomous aspirations, then I guess the answer was provided to you. Now it's time for stepping out of the Carpathian Basin, talk about the European Union, arena of the European Union, and let's take a look at the approach, the attitude of the European Union, especially in the Parliament, takes towards us. A speech presented by Deutsch Tamás, EP member, European Parliament member. What's the stance about political prisoners in the European Parliament? Dear Tamás, over to you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I'd like to welcome all of you with special regards to Joe Ray on behalf of the Minority Law Protection Institution. Director, thank you very much for the possibility of sharing a few thoughts of mine with you. Permit me to also welcome Beke and Zoltán. I'm happy to be here with you. Special greetings to Kristina Morvai, fellow EP member, European Parliament member. I'm happy that we can meet here as well, and follow Tibor, my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, you may not even know what difficult situation Mr. Choti has put the presenters of today's conference. This may not hold true for Beke and Zoltán, because it's very difficult to put together thoughts at the conference. The title of the conference is the most important statement of the essence of the whole conference. Justice for Beke István and Zoltán. That is the reason. This is the concept, this is the common will, the common emotion that we have in common. This is why we are here, this is what invited us here. Not only do we want to talk about it, but also do act upon. I will make it brief. 6 comments, however, as a foresay. First, and not most, let's be cautious about calling this Beke Szőcs case Beke István and Szőcs Zoltán. Danger is overly high because back then, in the first parliamentary cycle, after the change of regime, Zoltán Zoltán Takács Péter submitted Zoltán Takács law. And Zoltán Zsolt, who was known for a sour person, although he was very humorous, he came up to us, corridor of Parliament. Thomas, please come over. Yes, please. Imagine this. I received this letter, and he showed me this letter. Dear Mr. Zoltán Takács, I apologize, Takács, for calling you by the first name, although both are family names. So let's not make Szőcs a first name. Let's talk about Beke István and Szőcs Zoltán. Well, Yuri called me and invited me to be a presenter at this conference. I could only think of one thing. Possibly he knows the story as well, that about 30 years ago, in August 1989, I was a political prisoner in Prague for 8 days. Upon my return, there was no internet at that time. There was not even telephone in all the households. There was a telegram I received. I was excited to open it, and Jenő Fonói, chairman of the National Assembly of Political Prisoners, wrote to me. He wrote that he was happy that I returned in good health from Prague to Budapest, and he welcomed us as the last political prisoners of the communist system. And he asked me to become a member of the National Assembly of Political Prisoners. I had to search for the telephone number of Fonói. I told him, National Assembly of the Political Prisoners. It's convicts of 1946. People who were convicted to death. Not only did they convict you, but they hanged the rope around your neck, and well, you were expecting that you would be hung, and that the rejection of the Presidential Council would be read to you. Well, then you were told that your request was accommodated, accepted. This is how you live on and survived. So, with all due respect, we are not worthy of becoming members of the National Assembly of Political Prisoners. So, we may have been one of the last political prisoners. I may have been one of the last political prisoners of the communist system, but I'm still not a member. But I was sure about one thing: when after the communist occupation, there shouldn't be any political prisoners anymore. Well, this is not the only thing I was wrong about. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thirdly, let me tell you, we're many with many different kinds of thinking, standing behind two very important people, very important cause, fighting for the health of two fellow patriots convicted. I'd like to offer this thought to you. And here's a thought I would like to offer to a person who thinks differently from me in his human quality. He should be assumed less. That's the classic communist tactics. Instead, we should try to find what is it that we can agree on, what is it that we can like about or act upon together. And ladies and gentlemen, let's do something in order for being able to avoid falling into this trap. If somebody thinks differently from us, he is not necessarily a weak person or lower than us. I've not known the roll-up of the minority legal protection institution before. I didn't know about their slogans, but I myself thought I would raise the quote of Szabó Dezső: every Hungarian is responsible for every Hungarian. Well, we think and we feel this responsibility, and we are knowledgeable about the history of this outrageous procedure. Permit me to go beyond even the slightest trace of wanting to joke here, but be considerate about conspiration theory, because if we give too much leeway to such theories, we will not be able to reveal any practical terms of conspiration. Anybody having read the story wouldn't continue trying to find conspiracy theory, because in fact we are talking about the practical crystallization of conspiracy. This is conspiracy at its best or worst. Ladies and gentlemen, obviously, in the previous part of the conference, it's been mentioned that the Deputy Chairman of the jurisdiction of the Hungarian National Assembly, Beke István, and Beke Zoltán, Chairman of Human Dignity Committee, with their joint initiative, have turned to the President of the Republic of Romania to exercise his right as offering mercy to Beke István and Szőcs Zoltán. And I'd like to hereby welcome that initiative here as well, in front of the conference. And last but not least, concluding my initial comments, let me also tell you that in the current festive period, Advent of 2018, I believe, just like my friend Károly, Chairman, has referred to this already, probably I'm not just overly sensitive in the mercantile style of TV commercials. If somebody is deprived of his freedom, then he would raise a voice harsh against that. If somebody stands up for public views in the interest of his community, a national community, fighting, working for the benefit of that community, and therefore he suffers unfair legal procedure and showcase is presented, displayed against him, it's even more upsetting. And yes, young people are sitting in a prison for an unjust reason, if at all. There is a period in a year when it's twice as much painful that somebody is away from the loved ones in an unjust manner in prison. That, in fact, is the pre-Christmas period, Advent. And I'm very happy that we can talk about them in this very period, talk about Beke István and Szőcs Zoltán. And on to my messages. First and foremost, the European Union doesn't start outside Hungary. Hungary is part of the European Union, and I'm proud that sometime in the early 2000 years, at an October 23rd national celebration as member of the Orbán government at that time, I could deliver the festive speech on the stage of the opera. Let's forget about the minority complex that comes through these sentences. Hungary would like to join the European Union. Pilgrimage way. Hungary is entitled to the European Union and the benefits of the European Union. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not in Brussels or Strasbourg. Urvai Kristin is also not in Brussels or Strasbourg. We live here. We live in Hungary. We are Hungarian politicians, and with your trust, we represent Hungarian citizens in the jurisdiction body of the European Union. Why am I saying that? This week, the European Parliament discussed the Sakharov Award, which is to appreciate the efforts made for European rights. Oleg Sentsov, Ukrainian person, received that. He lives in the Crimea Peninsula, Ukrainian citizen, born in the Crimean area. Ever since the Russian occupation of the Crimean, he kept saying that he remains Ukrainian citizen, and as a Ukrainian citizen, he raised his voice against the legal injustice that Ukrainian people suffered. And the story of him being imprisoned based on Showcase lawsuits is like copycat of Beke and Zoltán, or Oleg Sentsov's procedure is meant to be copycatted concretely when it comes to Beke and Szőcs Zoltán. Same legal documentation reflected back. Yes, believe it or not, Oleg Sentsov was sentenced for having committed terror act, and in fact he was sentenced for terror because they found New Year's Eve petarda firecrackers in his apartment. Quoting the legal documentation of Szőcs Zoltán and Beke István, but Oleg Sentsov's. Ladies and gentlemen, in fact, European Parliament is right. Freedom to Oleg Sentsov. What? For God's sake. If freedom to Oleg Sentsov, then freedom to Beke István and Zoltán as well. Enough is enough, ladies and gentlemen. If somebody represents the mainstream union politics belonging to the western part of the European Union, they continuously apply dual measurement in terms of minority people, if they belong to minority related to their gender rights, gender behavior, but if somebody belongs to the indigenous minority and their rights are infringed just because they belong to that minority, then they keep a low profile and remain numb. So just like Panzergava said, within the European Union institutions, similar to Oleg Sentsov, because these Hungarian young people have become victims similar to Oleg Sentsov. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, in fact, the situation is like this. Currently, in the European Union, protecting the rights of national minorities is not part of the minority right protection of the European Union. It is not a problem of the state of law, but rather the mainstream liberal new leftist political interpretation of this issue, which interpretation, by the way, interprets protection of minorities only for gender or lifestyle extremity. Lifestyles. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, trusted by the Hungarian electors, many of the MPs working in the European Parliament, unfortunately not all of them, are doing the utmost in order to use the institutions meant to protect the minorities to entail and to extend protection over national minorities as well. But no matter how much this seems to be a effort, no matter how long you have to keep repeating the same messages, no matter how tiresome it seems to be day after day, week after week, coming up with the same message, it's our determined goal here, and we are not willing to compromise on that. That the legal institutions of minority protection should be extended to protected rights of national minorities as well. And thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, the alleged infringement of state of law, or the system-level alleged infringement of state of law, has become trendy topics in the European Union. Just very silently, I'd like to make a point here. The way the European Union works in countries that have been members of the European Union since 2004, there seems to be no problem with the state of law whatsoever. As for countries who joined in 2004 or before, looks like all of them, looks like almost all of them, sooner or later, system-level infringement of the state of law occurs. And let's not only talk about Poland or Hungary. Lithuania has been the first one from among the Baltic states where system-level state of law infringement related European Parliament hearings were ordered and stances were taken. Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania and Malta. They are already on the menu. Have no doubt, as soon as Bulgaria is out of the presidential troika, or threesome of the European presidency, on December 31st, that situation, December 1st, have no doubts, Bulgaria will be put on the agenda as well. Looking around, very interestingly, there's no problem whatsoever in those 15 countries. Human rights are represented in a perfect manner. Those countries which have been members of the European Union before 2004, since then 13 new members joined, and of the 13, basically 9 have been put on the agenda already. And it doesn't take too much courage that number 10, 11, 12 and 13 will come up as well. Well, ladies and gentlemen, do we still need to represent the values or the message of the state of law? Yes, very definitely yes. I'd like to outline that. And this may sound like commonplace, but still makes sense. Protection of the principles of the way a state of law operates is a basic national interest. What is happening in the European Union now has got nothing to do with the protection of state of law. It is nothing else but the supremacy-driven, liberal, new leftist political interpretation of the Western European countries as to what they think should be right in Central Eastern Europe, or how we should have decided at the popular vote, or how they think we should have decided at the parliamentary elections, or what they think about how we should structure economic life. And we should decide in all the questions where we have the authority to decide as European Union member country, based on our sovereignty. Well, protection of the state of law and this political Trojan horse should be unveiled. We should raise awareness about that. And just like Oleg Sentsov received the Sakharov Prize, I believe the name of Beke and Zoltán, Jean-Claude Juncker. As conclusion, what we should do, I will give you no news. On the one hand, all channels must be put so that public awareness is raised about the release of the 2 Hungarian people who were convicted in a showcase trial. Even if it seems to be tiresome, if it seems to be a jungle of paragraphs, as a lawyer, I'm saying it only seems to be like a jungle. Law is not devilish, in fact. It has to be applied in the interest of humans. And last but not least, very definite and characteristic diplomatic efforts and steps are taken on behalf of, are required on behalf of Hungary. Definite diplomatic steps are not exclusively government level steps. The Hungarian parliament also has connections with the Romanian parliament. Players of the Hungarian political life also maintain relations with them. And just like the Prime Minister would say, he's been quoted before, the 100 years of loneliness is over. Every Hungarian, no matter where he lives in the world, he lives in the Carpathian Basin, either within or outside the current borders of the country. No matter what injustice is suffered by him or her, that all Hungarians would be backed and supported by the Hungarian state. On the token of that, I would like to thank you very much for this conference and for your patience. Good thing is that I do not have to deliver a lecture anymore after Deutsch Tamás. His excellent rhetorics convey a thought. It would be difficult. Makes the closing superfluous as well, because his last convey of thoughts is pretty much the same that I was planning on delivering or to you, sharing with you. Few words nevertheless from me. First and utmost, it may sound overly generic, but let's put it right. It has to be said, unfortunately, it has to be said that in Romania, the spirit of Ceausescu has returned into Romania. This is a slogan that everybody understands, all Europe. And just like Tamás said, in fact, everything has to be done, and we are doing our utmost, the Minority Legal Protection Institution, leaning upon its own means and tools, legally speaking, also incenting political sources, political forces. We are trying to do our utmost in order for the 2 innocently convicted political prisoners, and let's use this term, political prisoners, would regain their freedom after being provided justice to. So they should not regain their freedom from out of mercy, but by providing justice. I do not imagine we are alone in this fight. I know we are not alone. We're also not alone in the NGO sector. Many institutions and names have been raised here. The NGO sector is doing its utmost here and in Transylvania and in the whole of Carpathian Basin. Parliamentary dimension is doing its utmost as well. We heard about the contact made by Páncél Kálmán, chairman representing the National Assembly. Deutsch Tamás we heard as well from the European Parliament. So, civilian sector, NGO sector, and parliamentary dimension. And thirdly, this is the area of politics, the government level of power. It is not talk they have to do, but walk the talk, take action, and they are taking action. Hopefully, results will show pretty soon. Interesting thing I would like to share with you. My associate Attila Donish raised the attention to this. I do not want to steal the show from him. Early this month, December 10th, there was the Day of International Human Rights, because in 1948 this accord has been signed, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It was titled, and Section 7 of that is truly relevant to the Beke, István Szőcs, Zoltán case. And Thomas, you are absolutely right about that. Family name, first name. People tend to abbreviate for reason of speediness. We term it right, but the original title, yes, Justice to Beke István and Szőcs Zoltán. So in fact, let's call them by the full name. Anyway, Section 7 stipulates this. In front of the law, everybody is equal, and without any discrimination, entitled to the fair protection of the law. Everybody is entitled to unique protection. Any discrimination infringing with this current act. So everybody is equal in front of the law, and everybody is entitled to equal protection. Well, dual politics is Janus-faced. It has shown immediately. They are saying exactly the opposite in the European dimension, and back home, acting against that back home. Because the Foreign Ministry in Romania, December 14th, released this declaration, and here's what it says. The UN, as member of the UN and other regional organizations, preparing for the upcoming presidency of the European Union, Romania joins the efforts of the international community targeting the respect of human rights. So Romania joins the respect of human rights. Well, dear Romanian friends, here's the message to you from here. This is the great opportunity. Prove yourselves right. Act upon it. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I'd like to express our gratitude and thank you for having come here for this conference. I'd like to thank the presenters for taking the time, honoring us with their presence. I'd like to thank all those following us through the internet for your time, for having listened to our thoughts, our proposals, and gather information about future actions. And I'd like to thank the press and media for reporting from here and taking our message to all around the world, hopefully, of what has been said here, because in fact, as it was said in the introduction, the objective of this conference here is to raise the attention of the international public to this unprecedented showcase trial, and through that, expose the nature of Hungarians living in Transylvania. Thank you for the attention, and I would like to sit back behind the table I will elaborate on the questions.